union and harmony, and the other pole would be its opposite. We've got a yin and a yang, a plus and a minus. We've got the, usual positron, electron, whatever. Everything has a particular opposite. And if you juxtapose these ideas, this natural cadence, logical cadence down, you will have to account for this business of two poles interacting, their potential difference, of course, meeting in the middle, an interface which then buds off universes like ours with an amalgam of both contained within it, which means that all that is together an absolute and perfect knowledge and knowing is mixed in with the opposite momentum, which is breaking it up all the time. And we have both of those things, as we all note, in our universe of parts, as we know it as such. And so here we are, through all the centuries, coming down into, as you say, we came with light, and then we came with into gas, and then with liquid, and then we have stages of solid, and that's sort of the arrangements of matter come down in that kind of sequence. And into this, we have to feed in such a wonder as the human element or our species. And of course, this is happening all over the universe in countless billions of planets. And, just to digress a moment, recently science has been telling us that there are now many, many hundreds of thousands of Earth-like planets out there. You've then got from that the association with, well, have they all got a god that's, rather like the old chap in the Sistine Chapel, with his flowing beard pointing his finger at Adam and all that business?
Yeah.
Or, hey, what is this God concept all about? You see how it happens, Brooks. You just have to look at all of these things as you take this new stance and bring it forward. And so, therefore, the interesting thing for me was, from that simple question of what is a UFO, I was having to explain the genesis of humankind and how humankind sat on this existential platform, and this entire thing then unfolded to our present contemporary stance on matters and so on. So,
well, the idea that you're laying down an existential premise would mean that there has to be an assumption of awareness. Because in order to exist, really, you have to be aware that you're existing. I mean, a penguin is not self-aware, and yet it survives. It has instincts mechanisms.
Some might argue with the fact that that animals aren't self-aware. I think they have a notion of all of that. A crow, for instance, will pick up a stick and work out something for food from a difficult set of circumstances. And, of course, people will look at this and say, look, this animal has intelligence. He is trying to get the food. The premise is to continue his life, whatever. And this is the way he contrives doing it. And so it's a very simple thing. People talk about, how long it took mankind to invent the wheel. Well, if an animal can do this, it's a really big question. Why didn't we do this for 3 or 4 million years with prior types of man? There is something here that's out of kilter, so to speak.
Right. This new idea of biosemiotics sort of assumes that even insects have some sort of primitive sense of awareness, that they it's just that the notions that they're using, for example, the example I read about recently is that a tick will sit on a blade of grass for months on end, and all it's thinking about is or all it's aware of is looking for this smell of sweat, so that it knows to drop on a creature to take its blood. But it has that, at least, awareness of that, perhaps.
Absolutely. So, therefore, its deductive sense would point out its own place in this entire scenario. Now, if I may continue and go back to the kind of point I was making, it's easy to get off the market. See, for me, the whole universe as we know it, that thing that cascaded from the interaction of two primal existential poles, this universe of ours is a hive of force. So therefore, you would conclude that its opposite end would be no force whatsoever. Each point within our universe of parts, as I call our home, as living beings, is a huge field of tension. It is a tension that's caused by potential differences between two absolute poles, as I said before. The pole I call the pole of perfect harmony, and its opposite, utter chaos. And God, if you like, as a concept, is representative of one, and the devil, if you like, as a concept, is representative of the other. So to me, there are no heebie-jeebies, if you like, in this world. It's very simply explained. If you use semantics, you can use one, you can call that God, and you can call the other thing the devil, if you like. So
Sure.
We've got two things there. One that's breaking things apart and making it much more complex, as you said in your introduction. And, of course, the other thing that returns things from whence they came into a situation of total parity and harmony, and from which all things may be known and seen within an implied singularity, I, for want of a better word, would call Godhead. Not to be too religious about it and so on. So the point is that there is it's much better seen neutrally and in a secular way, but there is no reason why anyone who wants to have a sense of it as a personalized entity, if you like, might call it God. I have no qualms about things like that. So the basic scales against which all existence can be understood is based on the properties of the purely atomic physical universe, as we know it, set against what I call the Godverse, a non-physical world that exists in, I believe, in the space between atoms, which may be described as a zero-point field, if you like, outside space, the space-time continuum, and below the minimum level of force it takes to kind of self-sustain the atomic world of, space-time, mass, matter, atoms, etc., and so on. So there are three basic scales here based on this paradigm. That which is natural and has its origins in the Godverse, and that which is artificial and has its origins in our universe, the artifact of the interaction of two basic existential poles. And then the second would be that which lives in the sense that we understand the living process biologically, and that which is not living, table, chair, statue, whatever you like to describe. And then the third is, that which kind of tends towards the making of the whole out of parts, i.e., the sense of unionizing, caring, loving momentums. It's an emotional accent we talk about here in these kinds of things. It's a psychological invention, if you like. It's an abstraction, but nevertheless, it's the powerful thing. One thought is an abstraction, so we function out of these abstractions. We underestimate them. Science doesn't quantify them or qualify them because they can't really be measured, if you see what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
But nevertheless, it drives everything, as you know, and it brings wondrous things about as a result of its momentums and so on. So you've got this caring, loving momentum, and that which tends to make parts of the whole come together, and that which makes divisive, self-centered momentums, if you see what I'm trying to say.
Sure,
so
sure.
There we have, if I may just finish this, there we have this entire scale of reference against which we have to posture everything else, Brooks. And that is a kind of beginning point from which I take in the expression of what we might call human terms of reference and so on, and species come about and so forth, as a result of that large derivational compendium, if you like. See?
Well,
so,
the idea that one of the parts is living and one of the parts is non-living, one would tend to say, what is life? What is living? I mean, it's not the non-living parts that make me up. I mean, that's about $10 worth of store-bought chemicals. But the living thing that animates this biological transducer in which I exist on this planet, that's the more difficult thing to measure. And the question is, are we then offspring or descendants of some intelligence that is also self-aware?
Let's get a medical perspective on this,
yes.
Doctor.
It's difficult to measure, but without which no measurement ever happens, no observation ever happens without the conscious observer.
That's right.
And I've been really fascinated, pleasantly surprised when I read Erwin Schrödinger's book, What is Life? And this is a book by one of the founders of quantum theory who came up with an equation that is one of the most accurate things that has ever been produced by science. And he said that basically this idea that science is making a mistake with the empirical outlook, with this idea that you can study the world as though it doesn't have you in it, as though there is no mind, as though it's all just empty, dead particles. What he suggested is that actually mind is fundamental to it, rather than mind being an abstraction within a real, solid, concrete, physical universe. Physicality is an abstraction within real, eternal mind. And people might be surprised that I'm saying that the founder of quantum theory spoke about eternal mind, but he was a very rational man, and he had to look at the fact that actually, if you look at space and time, if you take it in the Einsteinian point of view, that the block universe idea, past, present, and future, all could be one and the same, and you could see it all together. But yet, as conscious beings, we have this sense of there being a now, a moment, and that can only happen through sentience. And Schrödinger's great point, which was I think a great revelation and simple logic, is just to say, hang on a minute, if time is a result of the existence of the conscious sentient observer, then how can the conscious sentient observer begin or end in time? We must have to be eternal. And then also the fact that what is within any of us sentient human beings, whatever nationality, race, creed, color, any of that, it's all, the actual awareness sense is the same. What we're aware of may vary from person to person, our own individual memories, experiences, what we do out of choice in our use of our free will, which is another fascinating subject, which hopefully we'll come to later, may be different. But fundamentally, the actual prime nature of mind in all of us is identical. And he said that this pointed to the fact that fundamentally we're all one, and that our division as separate beings, which we make more of through ego, separation, prejudice, selfishness, jealousy, and all of these things, competition. These are all how we divide, and perhaps may actually be, according to Nigel's thesis, which makes a lot of sense to me, may actually be the fundamental momentum which actually caused the Big Bang in the first place.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so this then manifests itself, you see, in the way that I kind of derive it into what we call life and livingness, to go back to your point. And what exactly is this? See, our individualities are defined by an expression of force against no force. Visualize, if you like, a sheet of paper with holes in it. Where there is paper, there is force. Where there is a hole, there is no force. In other words, an area with no paper would be termed, in my reference, a derivation of God, the God verse within the universe. So I look at it as that place where there is atomic force and all its derivations has its own implication, and that the space between the atoms has a point somewhere right in the center of that space between atoms where there is no force, through which the Godversian influence comes in, the abstract influence of knowingness, thinkability, all of those kinds of things that provide this background screen we call consciousness and so on. And so from within that frame of reference, we get words like conscience, that final singularity derivation point it all goes back to, that summarizes everything and gives us a comparative scale against which you can view all other things.
Oh, yeah, it's the measuring force itself. I'm kind of reminded a little bit of Sir Roger Penrose saying that quantum, or that consciousness was the result of quantum gravity. And I rewrote that recently and said, no, actually, quantum gravity is the result of consciousness.
Absolutely, Brooks. Absolutely. Well done. And that's quite true. I believe that is quite true as far as we can get to truth in a universe of diminishing returns, if you like.
Exactly.
We know that, our prized objects or whatever it is made of atoms will decay if they're not looked after by an abstraction we call mind, if you see what I'm trying to say. You don't polish your car and keep it going, it'll end up as a rust heap and so forth.
The same
and
thing happens
everything
to
goes
my kitchen.
down in that scalar fashion to as a cosmologist now accept, a universe that's finite that will end in a sheet of force, of cold, absolute zeroed force, if you see what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
and so I believe that into this comes the invective of minds that actually said there is another universe, as a universe that goes eternally. And that is within our universe. I mean, the Christian teacher, for instance, Yeshua ben Yosef, to give him his is Judeo